When I first started making sourdough, I made the same mistake a lot of beginners make. I kept jumping from one recipe to another, trying complicated, high hydration doughs that were really just way too sticky and not that great for a beginner. But if I had to start all over today, this right here is the exact recipe I would use. It's simple, reliable, beginner-friendly, and if you stick with this one loaf, you can absolutely make sourdough like this at home. Starting out in the evening before you go to bed, take 25 grams of sourdough starter out of the fridge. For 6 years now, I've been in the habit of keeping 25 grams of unfed sourdough starter in my fridge at all times, and then I just take it out the night before I want to make sourdough bread, and it's perfectly fine to use. To find out more about my no-discard sourdough starter maintenance routine, check out the video I made specifically on that topic. For this recipe, all you need to do is take your 25 grams of starter and feed it 50 grams of water. Then stir the water and starter together so that the starter dissolves into the water. And then add 50 grams of bread flour to the jar. In total, you'll have used 25 grams of leftover sourdough starter, plus 50 grams of water, and 50 grams of bread flour. That'll end up giving you 100 grams of active and risen sourdough starter tomorrow morning to use in your dough, and you'll be left with 25 grams of sourdough starter to put back in the fridge. It's just a very easy, uncomplicated sourdough starter feeding. So once you've added the flour and water to the jar, stir the starter together until it's basically a pancake batter-like consistency. Scrape the sides of the jar down and mark the top of the starter with the rubber band so you can see how much the starter rises. Loosely place a lid on the jar to close it, or use one of these breathable lids like I've got here. And now your starter is ready to rise, so let it sit out on your counter overnight and rise for at least 6 to 8 hours. That should be just enough time for your starter to double in size like this. The next morning, your starter should be doubled in size and ready to use in your dough. To make your dough, start by placing a mixing bowl on a digital scale to weigh your ingredients, then add 300 grams of water to the bowl. This will end up being a 70% hydration dough when all is said and done, which means the dough isn't too dry, but it's not too sticky either. It's right in the sweet spot and perfect for beginners. Next, get out that active sourdough starter that has doubled in size and add 100 grams of sourdough starter to the mixing bowl. You only need 100 grams of starter for this recipe, so once you put that in your dough, you should be left with 25 grams of starter left over, exactly what you started with. You can place that back into the fridge and save it for the next time you want to bake bread. Next, add 10 grams of salt. I use kosher salt, but any kind of plain sea salt or table salt will work just as well. Once you've added the salt and the starter, break everything up with a spoon and stir it together just to dissolve the starter and salt into the water. Once you've got a milky liquid that looks something like this, you can add your last ingredient, the flour, and it will be a lot easier to incorporate. The bread flour I usually use is King Arthur brand bread flour. It's at 12.7% protein, but any kind of bread flour that's similar in protein level should work great. So add 450 grams of bread flour to the mixing bowl, and that is your fourth and final ingredient. Now stir the dough ingredients together with a metal spoon or a wooden spoon, either works fine. Some people like to scare you and say that metal utensils ruin sourdough, but I've been using metal bowls and metal spoons for years and I haven't noticed any difference or any problem with metal utensils. So use whatever utensil you want to bring your dough together. It should just take about 1 to 2 minutes of mixing. Keep mixing until all those dry bits of flour are gone, and the dough is roughly holding together in a shaggy lump like this. Once your dough looks like this, you can cover it up with a kitchen towel and let the dough rest for 30 minutes at room temperature. The 30-minute rest will allow the flour in the dough to hydrate, and the dough will hold together a lot better than before. Now it's time to stretch and fold the dough, which will develop gluten in the dough, but it's a little bit gentler than kneading by hand. So take an edge of the dough, stretch it up in the air, and fold it over. Then give the dough a quarter turn, stretch the next corner of the dough into the air, and fold it over the top of the dough again. Then give the bowl another quarter turn, stretch the next corner of the dough up into the air, and then fold it over the top of the dough. You see where we're going here. Then give the bowl one more quarter turn, stretch the dough up into the air, and fold it over the top. That's really all you need to do for the first set of stretch and folds, but my dough was still looking a little bit shaggy, so I wanted to give it a few extra stretches and folds just to smooth the dough out a little bit. But once you're done with at least 4 stretches and folds, you are done with the first set, and you can cover up your dough with a kitchen towel and let it rest for another 30 minutes. You're going to repeat this stretching and folding process 2 more times. 30 minutes later, it's time for the second set of stretch and folds. These should be a little bit easier than the first, and the dough should feel a lot smoother and stretchier and just hold together a lot better. So just like the first set, you're going to stretch and fold the 4 corners of the dough. So stretch one up in the air, fold it over, Give the dough a quarter turn, then stretch the next edge of the dough up into the air and fold it over the top. Another quarter turn, stretch and fold, quarter turn, and stretch and fold. Then cover up the dough again with a kitchen towel and let it rest for another 30 minutes. 30 minutes later, you're now in the home stretch and on your final set of stretch and folds. You're just going to stretch and fold the four corners of the dough the same way you did in the first and second sets. After you're done, the gluten in the dough should be well developed and your dough is ready to rest for a long rise. This first rise is what we sometimes call bulk fermentation. You could let the dough rise in the same mixing bowl that you used before, but for the first rise, I typically like to transfer my dough into one of these 7-cup glass bowls with a lid. It really helps me see how much the dough is rising and growing because I can actually see through the sides of the bowl. So if you're using one of these glass bowls, just add a touch of olive oil or vegetable oil so the dough doesn't stick as much to the bowl, and then transfer the dough into the bowl with the seam side down and the smooth side facing up. Then close the lid on top of the bowl or cover the bowl with a sheet of plastic wrap to create an airtight seal, and then let the dough rise at room temperature for 4 to 8 hours. Then once your dough rises to about double its original size, you can move on to the shaping step. To get the best looking bread possible, I like to split my shaping into 2 steps, the pre-shape and the final shape. For the pre-shape, I'm going to shape the dough into a ball and then let it rest. And then after a short rest period, I'm going to shape the dough into an oval. This 2-step shaping process will build a lot of tension and structure into the dough, and it'll help the dough rise really tall into an attractive final loaf of bread. So for the pre-shape, take your dough out of the bowl and place it directly onto an unfloured counter. Then shape the dough into a tight ball by cupping and pulling the dough with your hands like this. Use the counter and your hands to create tension across the top of the dough, making a tight ball of dough. Once your dough looks something like this, leave it on the counter uncovered to rest for 30 minutes. This rest period will allow the dough to relax in its new shape, and it'll be easier to do the final shape later. 30 minutes later, get out a 10-inch oval Banneton basket and make sure to dust it generously with bread flour so that the dough doesn't stick. And you can put that off to the side while you give the dough its final shape. Here's how to shape the dough in an oval to fit your Banneton basket. Start by dusting the top of the dough with a little bit of bread flour to create a non-stick barrier. Then flip the dough over so that the smooth side or the floured side is against the counter and the sticky side is facing up. Then gently pull on the edges of the dough to create a rectangular shape instead of a circle. Once your dough looks something like this, you're ready to fold. If you mentally divide the dough in thirds, take the right third of the dough and fold it over the middle third, then press down to stick. Then grab the left third of the dough and fold it over the middle third as well, pressing it down to stick into the dough. Then if there's any excessive air bubbles, you could pinch or pop them to get rid of them. Sometimes the big ones get in the way. Now you should be left with a nice long seam running down the middle of the dough. Now to get an oval shape, you're going to roll your folded dough into a tight cylinder. So starting on the far end, roll the dough towards you, and then using your thumbs, press the dough into itself, forming a tight cylinder like this. There is your oval shaped dough. It's smooth on the top and has that seam running along the underside. The last thing you'll want to do as far as shaping goes is smooth out the edges of the dough. There tend to be these little swirls on the ends of the dough. So to get rid of those, I like to take this flap of dough on the end and I stretch it out and then tuck it underneath the dough, smoothing it out, making a nice smooth end. I flip the dough over and do the same thing to the other side. I stretch out the dough flap, covering up that swirl, and tuck the dough underneath the rest of the loaf. Now you've got a nice oval-shaped loaf with a lot of tension and structure built into it during the shaping process, so the loaf will rise nice and tall when it bakes in the oven. Pull the Banneton basket over to you and then flip the dough over so that the seam side is now facing up in the air and the smooth side of the dough is facing down, and drop the dough into the Banneton basket upside down. If the seam is coming apart in any spots, you can just pinch it closed so everything's nice and tight. Now you have an oval-shaped loaf in a Banneton basket that's ready for the second rise, also called the final proof. For the final proof, I like to let the dough rise for 1 hour at room temperature to get a head start on the fermentation. So cover your dough up with a kitchen towel and let it rest on the counter for 1 hour. After that 1 hour rise, your dough should be noticeably puffy to the touch, and it'll be actually rising a little bit in the Banneton basket. It's got a head start on the rising process. Now you have two options. You can either let the dough rise for another half hour and then bake it, or you can let the dough cold proof in the fridge for anywhere between 8 and 24 hours. Then the next day you can bake it whenever you want. The next day, a half hour before you're ready to bake your bread, preheat your oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Make sure you have your Dutch oven inside the oven preheating as well. Then once the oven is preheated, take your dough out of the fridge and it is ready to bake. I bake my bread cold from the oven and it works every time. The two things you'll need here are a piece of parchment paper that's just a little bit bigger than your dough, and then a dough lamb or a razor blade, which I'll show you in a minute. Gently peel back the dough from the sides of the banneton basket just to loosen it so it doesn't stick to the basket. Then place the piece of parchment paper on top of the dough, and flip the dough over so that it falls out cleanly on top of the parchment paper. Now the dough is right side up. Now before we score the dough with the razor blade, just dust off the excess flour that's on top of the dough, and then get out your dough lamb or razor blade. I like to use this UFO lamb from Wire Monkey. I'll include a link where you can get one just like this if you want a dough lamb. Then I like to do the one single slash technique for scoring my dough. I just start at the top holding the blade at a shallow angle and I slash all the way down. This scoring technique will force the dough to burst open along the score mark, creating an ear or that flipped up edge of crust on the final bread. Once your dough is scored, it's finally time to bake. So transfer the dough, parchment paper and all, into the hot Dutch oven. Then place the Dutch oven lid on to trap the steam and bake the bread for 20 minutes at 450 degrees Fahrenheit. 20 minutes later, remove the Dutch oven lid, releasing the steam and revealing the oven spring on your bread. If everything went correctly, your bread should have puffed up and burst open along that score mark, creating this beautiful sourdough ear. Now the bread has risen, we don't need to trap steam anymore, so keep the Dutch oven lid off and continue baking for another 15 to 20 minutes. Baking the bread for 15 minutes with the lid off will get you a light brown loaf that looks something like this, but if you want it to be even darker brown for an extra dark crispy crust, you can bake it for a full 20 minutes with the lid off. Once your loaf is done to the color of your liking, transfer it out of the Dutch oven and onto a cooling rack, and let it cool on the cooling rack for at least 1 hour before slicing in. After 1 hour, it's the moment of truth. The bread is finally cool enough to slice into, so I'm going to open mine up. The bread has a nice, airy, well-fermented interior without having too big of holes or anything like that. But especially for a beginner-friendly loaf, I think you can get a really attractive result if what you're going for is a nice, airy, open-crumbed interior. But at the end of the day, all that really matters is the taste, so I'm going to take this half of the loaf and cut it into a few half slices to taste test. From just this one little piece, I hope you can see just how soft this bread is on the inside, but it still does have a nice crispy crust on the outside too. And that contrast between crunchy and soft is really enjoyable, and it's something you don't really get with supermarket bread. As far as taste goes, this bread is mildly tangy on the inside with just a hint of that sourdough tangy flavor. But in general, there's just this complex homemade bread flavor that you can really only experience by making homemade sourdough yourself. So if you've tried and failed to make sourdough bread in the past, I really suggest you give this recipe and method a shot. So many people have had success with this recipe that I can pretty much guarantee it'll work for you too.